I won $47 million, dollars, and instead of celebrating, I used it to expose my family's true colors. Well, I found out crushed me, but ultimately set me free. My name is Cassie Wilson, and last Tuesday my world was utterly, unbelievably flipped upside down. I was 34, just an ordinary accountant, until I checked my lottery ticket. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. $47 million. dollars. It wasn't just numbers on a ticket. It was my entire future staring back at me. But after the initial dizzying shock, a chilling thought settled in. I wouldn't tell a single soul. You see, my family and money? It's complicated. More like a minefield. Before that Tuesday, my life was a relentless cycle of ordinary. Wake up at 6 a.m., coffee, then the gnawing worry of bills, deadlines. My job as an accountant in Portland was demanding. 60-hour weeks were the norm, especially during tax season. My one-bedroom apartment, modest. My car, well, it got me from A to B, but it was mine. My family situation was complicated, to say the least. My parents, Gregory and Diane, divorced when I was 14 and both remarried within 2 years. My father, Gregory, a high school physics teacher, married Stephanie, a real estate agent with expensive taste. My mother, Diane, found love with Warren, a successful business owner who had more money than my father, but kept a tight grip on every penny. I have 2 siblings. My younger sister, Lisa, 30, has always been the golden child. Ivy League, surgeon husband, 2 perfect children, and a beautiful suburban home. Then there's my older brother, Jason, 36. Charming, intelligent, but a magnet for trouble and a master at borrowing money. The pattern was always the same. Desperate call, emotional plea, promise to pay it back, then radio silence until the next crisis. My extended family was no less complex. My Aunt Martha, my mother's younger sister, was perhaps the only genuinely kind person in our family. Despite living paycheck to paycheck as an elementary school teacher, she always found ways to show up. She drove an ancient Honda that made alarming noises and lived in a small apartment filled with books and plants. Never a complaint. In stark contrast was my Aunt Heather, my father's older sister. She'd married wealthy and never let anyone forget it. Holidays with her meant endless critiques of everyone's life choices and backhanded comments about my career, my apartment, and my perpetually single status. Her son, my cousin Ryan, had inherited her entitlement, but none of her financial success, and he had a gambling problem the family pretended not to notice. My history with financial favors from family, it had left me utterly jaded, hollowed out. Like the time Jason needed $5,000 for rehab 3 years ago. I emptied my meager savings, only to find out months later he never went. Never. Or Lisa's wedding. $2,000 on my credit card. I'll pay you back after the honeymoon, Cassie. 5 years later, I was still paying interest on her fairy tale. And my dad needed a loan to repair his roof after a storm. Supposedly, I sent what I could. A month later, their Cancun vacation photos popped up on my feed. Cancun. My best friend, Charlotte, she was the only one who truly understood. A nurse, she knew struggle, and she never judged my messy, complicated feelings about my family. She was my anchor, reminding me that not everyone was out to take advantage. Even at work, it was a battle. My boss, Arnold, a credit-stealing vampire. My colleague, Derek, a master of disappearing acts, leaving me to clean up his mess, yet somehow always basking in the glory I earned. Despite feeling constantly underappreciated, I kept my head down, hoping someday it would pay off. My weekly lottery ticket, it was my one tiny rebellion, a whisper of hope. My family, of course, loved to mock it. My mom called it a tax on people who can't do math. Jason joked I should just give him the money directly. My dad, the science teacher, lectured me on probability and statistics. But for me, it was a lifeline, a tiny, glittering chance at freedom that I couldn't bring myself to give up, even as years passed without winning more than $20 here and there. I had dreams, big ones. Travel, a master's degree, a savings account that wouldn't shatter at the sound of an unexpected car repair bill. But they felt so impossibly distant as I approached my mid-30s, still paying off student loans and carrying a small but persistent credit card debt. Every month was a brutal balancing act. Coupons, price comparisons, endless calculations in my head. Could I afford that dinner invitation? Or did I need to invent another excuse? My 10-year-old Corolla, making alarming noises when it rained. This was my life. Ordinary, often difficult, sometimes lonely, but stable in its own way, until that one single piece of paper tore through everything I thought I knew about myself and the people I called family. The winning ticket, I bought it on my 30th birthday. A particularly brutal week at work, Arnold had, predictably, stolen credit for a financial strategy that saved a major client thousands. I stopped at Gus's Corner Market, my usual ritual, but this time a twist. Happy birthday, Cassie. Gus, a kind, old man who'd owned the store for over 30 years, called out. Thanks, Gus. The usual, +1 for good luck, I said, handing him an extra 10 instead of my typical 20. Birthday splurge. Maybe today's your lucky day. He winked. Instead of my usual quick pick, I chose my own numbers. My birthday, 3 and 16. My mom's, 12. My dad's, 21. Martha's, 9. Charlotte's, 30. 6 numbers. The most important people in my life, even the ones who'd let me down. That evening, Thai takeout, a birthday wine from Charlotte, a quiet night. The drawing was at 8 p.m. I scrolled through social media, seeing vibrant birthday celebrations, feeling a familiar pang. At 8:30, I remember the tickets. Casually, I checked. First number, 3. A small smile. Second, 16. My heart gave a tiny skip. Third, 12. Fourth, 21. My palms were sweating. Fifth, 9. I was holding my breath. Sixth and final, 30. I stared. No, this couldn't be real. I rechecked. Again, I turned on the television and rewound to the live drawing. My numbers, one by one. I dropped the remote. No way. I whispered to my empty apartment. No way. $47 million. According to the lottery website, I was the sole winner. After taxes, around $28 million. An absurd, unfathomable sum. The girl who'd been thrilled by a 10% laundry detergent coupon hours earlier. I didn't sleep. Hours of frantic online research. What I found was terrifying. Lottery winners, their lives in ruins. Families ripped apart by greed. Strangers, long-lost relatives, emerging with sob stories and outstretched hands. Winners bankrupt within 5 years, more miserable than ever. One article called it the quickest path to losing everything you care about. As the sun reluctantly crept up, I made my decision. I would claim the money, but I would tell no one. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even Charlotte, not yet. I needed time to breathe, to plan, to understand what this money truly meant for my life before everyone else tried to dictate it. That morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. I walked into the sleek, high-rise office of Philip Montgomery, an attorney specializing in financial planning and estate law. Clutching my purse, the winning ticket inside, I felt like an imposter. Miss Wilson? He was in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, kind eyes behind expensive glasses. Professional. What can I help you with today? I took a breath and placed the ticket on his desk. I need to know how to claim this, I said, without anyone knowing it was me. His eyes widened, then he nodded. You've come to the right place. For 2 hours, Philip laid out my options, blind trusts, legal entities to keep my identity private, tax implications, assembling a team of financial advisors. The biggest mistake winners make, he warned, is telling too many people too quickly. Once that happens, there's no going back. My instinct had been right. I want to do this right, I told him. I don't want this money to ruin my life. Leaving his office with a folder full of documents, a list of next steps, a strange cocktail of excitement and dread churned inside me. More money than I'd ever dreamed of, and an immediate, crushing secret. I was about to live a double life, struggling accountant by day, secret multimillionaire by night. Over the next 2 weeks, the money became real. Invested. Secure. Yet, my daily life remained stubbornly unchanged. Work. Complaints about bills with coworkers. My old Corolla. The secrecy started to weigh. I found myself wondering about my family. Would they be happy? Respect my boundaries? Or would I become nothing more than a walking ATM? The questions gnawed at me. And then an idea sparked. A test. I would create a scenario where I desperately needed financial help. Not an outrageous sum, but enough to matter. I would approach each of them with the same story, the same request. Who would actually help? Who deserve a place in my new life? By the way, if you're still with me, if my story has you hooked, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the shocking revelations to come. The next day, I met with Philip again to ensure my finances were rock solid before I went through with my plan. Everything is in order, Cassandra, he assured me. Your financial future is secure. You could stop working tomorrow if you wanted to. The thought was tempting, but an abrupt lifestyle change would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. I'll stay at my job for now, I replied, at least until I figure some things out. That evening, over wine with Charlotte on my small balcony, I tried to share part of my plan. I'm thinking about an experiment. I began carefully. She raised an eyebrow. What kind? I took a deep breath. I'm going to tell them I lost my job and need financial help, just to see who actually cares enough to step up when I need it. Charlotte's face clouded with concern. Cassie, that sounds manipulative. Why would you do that? My voice hardened. Because I'm tired of being the only one who helps when others need it. I need to know who would be there for me if the tables were turned. Lying to test people? That doesn't sound like you. She pleaded. Why not just have an honest conversation? I scoffed. My family? Honest conversations? You know them, Charlotte. You've seen how they treat me. She shook her head. I think you're going to hurt yourself more than anyone. But I know that look. You've already made up your mind. She was right. My cover story was airtight. My marketing firm shut down unexpectedly after losing its biggest clients. I needed $5,000 for rent and medical bills until I found a new job. A significant sum, but not impossible for my well-off relatives. I'd crafted every detail. CEO embezzling funds, company under investigation, tight job market, depleted emergency fund from concerning medical tests. I knew they'd ask. I had my answers ready. You need to sound genuinely distressed, but not desperate, Charlotte advised. Have specific details. I was ready. A twinge of guilt. Was Charlotte right? Was this manipulative? But then, I remembered all the times I'd emptied my savings, been left hanging. This wasn't just a test. It was self-preservation. My prediction list was grim. My mother probably offer some help, but less than I needed. My father, a lecture, maybe a small amount. Lisa, excuses about kids' expenses. Jason, definitely no money. Warren and Stephanie, outright refusal. Aunt Heather, judgment. Cousin Ryan, empty promises. My only sliver of hope. Aunt Martha, the one with the least to give. Even then, I kept my expectations low. $5,000 was a fortune for a public school teacher. The plan was set. It was time to find out who my real family was. I called my mother first, Diane, who always touted herself as the nurturing parent. My hands trembled. She answered, sounding distracted. Cassie, is everything okay? You sound upset. I plunged into the story. Her breathing grew concerned. Oh, honey, that's terrible. Have you applied for unemployment? What about your emergency fund? I explained unemployment would take weeks, and my emergency fund had been depleted by recent medical tests. Mom, I hate to ask, but I need $5,000 to cover rent and bills until I can find something new. I promise I'll pay you back. A long pause. Oh, Cassie, Warren and I just put a down payment on the lake house. We're pretty cash poor right now. She deflected. Have you asked your father? Lisa? Paul makes good money. I knew Warren's tight grip was legendary. I'll talk to Warren, she said, but I can't promise anything. You know how tight he is with money, especially when it comes to, well, you know. I knew. Warren had never considered me his responsibility. Sure, Mom. Just let me know as soon as you can. The rent's due next week. I will, honey. And I'm so sorry about your job. These things always work out for the best, though. Maybe this is a sign you should look at changing careers to something more stable. I noted it in my journal. Concern, but immediate deflection of responsibility. The next day, coffee with my father, Gregory. I chose a public place. You look tired, he greeted me. His face impassive as I recounted the tale. When I finished, asking for help, he leaned back, crossed his arms. The teacher's voice. Cassandra, I always taught you financial responsibility. This is exactly why I told you to keep 6 months of expenses saved at all times. What happened to that plan? Life happened, Dad. Medical bills, car repairs. Not everyone can afford to set aside that much money. He sighed heavily. And now you expect others to bail you out? What about your spending habits? Do you really need that apartment in that neighborhood? What about your cable subscription and those streaming services? For 20 agonizing minutes, a lecture, not once an offer of help. I would love to help you, Cassie, but Stephanie and I are focusing on our retirement right now. We can't afford to dip into those funds. It would be financially irresponsible. He patted my hand. Patronizing. This will be a good learning experience for you. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we make necessary changes. It hurt. Even though I expected it, it still hurt to hear him dismiss my needs so easily. My sister Lisa was next. I drove to her beautiful suburban home. Cassie, what a surprise, she exclaimed, opening the door to her immaculate house. As we sat in her gourmet kitchen, sipping lattes from her commercial-grade espresso machine, I told her about my situation. Oh my God, that's awful, she gasped, reaching across the granite island to squeeze my hand. Hope flickered. Then I mentioned needing to borrow $5,000. Oh, her expression shifted slightly. Well, this isn't a great time. We just bought the new Audi last month, and the kids' tuition was due. Plus, we're redoing the master bathroom. She glanced around nervously. Paul handles most of our finances, and he's really strict about our budget. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate, I said quietly. I know, she said quickly. Let me talk to Paul. Maybe we can help with a smaller amount. Or you could move in with us temporarily. The guest room, she admitted, was being used for storage right now. Her averted gaze told me all I needed to know. My brother Jason, perhaps the most disappointing. I sent him a detailed text. He responded, that sucks, sis. Really tight right now myself. Call you later. He never did. My follow-ups, unanswered. My calls, straight to voicemail. This from the same brother I'd bailed out countless times. It was a fresh wound. My stepmother Stephanie was blunt when I called her. Cassandra, I'm sure this is difficult, but Warren and I are not in a position to help. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to learn better financial management skills. While I reminded her about helping with repairs to their vacation cabin last year, she bristled. That was different. That was a family property that you also enjoy using. The one time I'd been invited to the cabin in 5 years apparently didn't matter. My stepfather Warren was even worse. You're not my daughter, he stated flatly when I called. I have supported your mother for years, but your financial problems are your own. Perhaps you should have chosen a more lucrative career path. Just like that. My cousin Ryan initially seemed sympathetic, promising to definitely help out. He even suggested meeting for lunch to give me a check. The day arrived. A text, an hour before. Something came up. Reschedule. He never did. He stopped responding altogether. Aunt Heather's response? Perhaps the least surprising, but still painful. Well, Cassandra, I always said that company of yours seemed unstable. I told your father you should have taken that bank job after college, but no one listens to me. She then proceeded to catalog every other relative's financial struggles, emphasizing how they overcame them without begging for handouts. Later, Lisa texted, Heather was already gossiping about my financial irresponsibility. A week. Rejections. Half promises. Utter silence. I was emotionally drained. The experiment confirmed my darkest fears. 7 people, all of whom I had helped, all of whom could not or would not return the favor. And then my phone rang. Cassie, honey, I just heard from your mother about the job. Are you okay? Aunt Martha. Her voice, thick with genuine concern. I hadn't even called her yet. She called me after hearing about my situation secondhand. I'm hanging in there, I said, the emotion in my voice now entirely real. Listen, I want to help. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow? My treat, of course. The next day, a small diner near her apartment. Martha, silver streak hair, simple ponytail, jeans, and a mismatched cardigan. She hugged me tight before we sat down. I'm so sorry about your job, sweetheart. That company never deserved you anyway. She asked thoughtful questions about my job search, offered to connect me with former colleagues. Then, after our plates were cleared, she pulled out an envelope. I want you to take this, she said, sliding it across the table. It's $3,000. I know it's not the full amount you need, but it should help with the rent at least. I stared at it. Martha, I can't take this. This is too much. Nonsense, she said gently. Family helps family. And she reached across the table, taking my hand. If you need a place to stay to save on rent, my sofa pulls out into a bed. It's not fancy, but you're welcome to stay as long as you need. Tears welled up, real ones this time. Thank you, I whispered. Now, don't you worry about paying this back right away. Get back on your feet first. Find a job you actually like this time. Life's too short not to be appreciated. Driving home, I clutched that envelope. $3,000. More than I knew Martha could comfortably spare. The stark, aching contrast between her response and the rest of my family couldn't have been more stark. The one person with the least to give was the only one who offered genuine, unconditional help. A quick search later, and my heart sank. That $3,000? It was almost all her savings. I discovered she was quietly battling complications from type 2 diabetes. Her medication costs had recently increased, and she had been picking up extra tutoring work just to make ends meet. Martha, who had so little, had given me almost everything she had without hesitation or conditions. Meanwhile, my mother, who had just spent $8,000 renovating a bathroom, couldn't spare $5,000 for her daughter's rent and medical bills. The knowledge was a physical blow. The next day, I invited Martha for dinner. As she settled on my worn couch, I saw the tiredness in her eyes, the fine lines around them deeper than I remembered. Martha, I need to tell you something. I began, placing her tea down. I haven't been completely honest. Her expression was open, curious. What is it, honey? I didn't lose my job. The company is fine. I still have my position. I made up the story. To see who in the family would help me if I needed it. A moment of silence. Then she nodded. Slowly. Are you angry with me? I asked, suddenly terrified of losing this one true connection. No, she said softly. Not angry. Sad, maybe. Sad that you felt you needed to test people this way. But I understand why. Our family hasn't always been kind to you. She took a sip of her tea. You were the only one who offered to help. I told her, recounting everyone else's excuses, the deafening silence. Martha sighed. People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. I learned that lesson the hard way myself. What do you mean? I asked. She set down her cup and folded her hands in her lap. My ex-husband, Robert. Did I ever tell you why we really divorced? I shook my head. The family story had always been vague. Something about growing apart. I came into a small inheritance when my grandmother died, about $50,000. Not a fortune, but significant for us at the time. Robert immediately had all these plans for the money, mainly investing in his friend's business ventures. She smiled ruefully. I wanted to save it for our future, maybe buy a small house. We fought about it for months. One day, I discovered he had forged my signature and withdrawn most of the money. By the time I found out, it was gone, invested in a restaurant that failed within a year. She shook her head at the memory. When I confronted him, do you know what he said? That it was our money, not just mine, and he had as much right to as I did. As if my name on the inheritance meant nothing. I was shocked. I had no idea. The family preferred the growing apart story, less messy. She reached for my hand. The point is, Cassie, I learned that some people see you as a resource, not a person. And it's a painful lesson. I'm so sorry that happened to you, I said, squeezing her hand. It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important about money and relationships. She looked at me intently. Money doesn't just reveal who others truly are, Cassie. It reveals who we are, too. How we use it, how we share it, how we talk about it. It's a powerful mirror. Her words hit me like a revelation. And in that moment, I knew. Martha, I said, there's something else. Something big. I took a deep breath. I won the lottery. 3 weeks ago. $47 million. Her eyes widened, but she stayed silent, waiting. I haven't told anyone else. Not my parents, not Lisa or Jason. Not even Charlotte. You're the first. Oh, Cassie, she breathed. That is life-changing. I know, and that's why I did the test. I needed to know who would be there for me without knowing about the money. Martha nodded slowly. I understand that. But what will you do now? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The money's secure. I have good financial advisors. But the family. Martha considered this. You know, you don't owe anyone anything, Cassie. Not even me. But I want to help you, I insisted. Your medical expenses. A better apartment. Whatever you need. She smiled gently. I don't need anything from you, sweetheart. I'm happy with my life. My apartment is small, but it's full of things I love. My car runs most of the time. I have my students and my books. And now, this wonderful secret with my favorite niece. She patted my hand. Just knowing you're secure and happy would be enough for me. Her selflessness broke my heart, then rebuilt it stronger. Here was someone who had given me nearly everything when she thought I needed it. And now, knowing I had millions, asked for nothing. As we continued talking into the night, the contrast between Martha and the rest of my family became even more stark. While I had been conducting my experiment, word had spread. My financial troubles were family gossip, not a call for compassion. My phone buzzed with texts. Mom, heard you asked Lisa for money too. You should have told me you were asking everyone. Feels like you're playing us against each other. Dad, Stephanie tells me you've been calling everyone for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about. They had twisted my cry for help into evidence of my flaws. They had revealed everything I needed to know about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my conversation with Martha, I met with Philip to discuss my long-term financial plans. Now that I had clarity about my family relationships, I could make decisions about my future with open eyes. I want to set up a trust for my Aunt Martha, I told him. Something that will cover her medical expenses and provide her with a comfortable retirement, but in a way that feels like a gift rather than charity. She is very proud. Philip nodded, making notes. We can structure it as a family trust that provides a monthly stipend. She wouldn't have to manage a large sum all at once, which could be overwhelming for someone not used to wealth. Perfect. I want to buy her a small house near wherever I decide to live. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable and accessible for someone with health issues. We spent the next hour discussing investment strategies, charitable foundations, and my own living situation. I had decided to give notice at my accounting job and focus on establishing a nonprofit organization aimed at helping elderly people living alone, inspired by Martha's situation. What about the rest of your family? Philip asked cautiously. Do you plan to tell them about the winnings? I shook my head. Not right now. Maybe not ever. But I do want to arrange a family meeting to clear the air about my financial troubles. Later that day, I called Charlotte and finally told her the truth about everything. The lottery win, the family experiment. After her initial shock, she understood why I had kept it secret. So what now? She asked. Are you going to become one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons and drives a beat-up car? I laughed. No, but I'm not going to suddenly start buying Bentleys either. I want this money to mean something, to do good, starting with Martha. She deserves it. Charlotte agreed. And what about everyone else? The ones who failed your test? I'm still figuring that out. I'll call the family meeting for this weekend. I told them I have an important announcement. Sunday, everyone showed up at my apartment. My mother and Warren, my father and Stephanie, Lisa and Paul, even Jason, who had been ignoring my calls for weeks. Aunt Heather arrived with a disapproving frown. Aunt Martha came last, giving me a secret, encouraging smile as she entered. As everyone settled into my small living room, looking around with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment, I stood before them, strangely calm. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there have been rumors going around about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Jason suddenly became very interested in his phone. Lisa and Paul exchanged glances. The truth is, I'm fine. I found a new job with better pay and benefits. I'll be transitioning to that position next month. This was technically true, as I had just appointed myself executive director of my new foundation with a modest salary. Well, that's wonderful news, my mother said with obvious relief. We've all been so worried. I noticed several faces relax. They had come expecting either to be asked for money again, or perhaps to stage some sort of intervention about my financial habits. Instead, they were getting good news that required nothing from them. "So why all the drama about needing money?" my father asked, his tone accusatory. "Why ask everyone for help if you had a job lined up?" I met his gaze steadily. "The job came through recently, and when I was in trouble, I reached out to my family. That's what family is supposed to be for, right?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "Well, we all have our own financial commitments," Stephanie said defensively. "It's not always possible to help, even when we want to." "Of course," I agreed. "We all have to make choices about our priorities." I turned to Jason. "Speaking of which, Jason, I noticed you never responded to my messages when I needed help. Yet, you had no problem asking me for $3,000 last Christmas for your rent." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I was going through some stuff, and I didn't have any money to give you." "You didn't even call me back," I pointed out. "That would have been free." The meeting continued in this vein, with me calmly but firmly addressing the hypocrisy and absence of support I had experienced. No one admitted any wrongdoing. There were excuses, justifications, and even some attempts to turn the blame back on me for making everyone feel guilty. As they filed out after an uncomfortable hour, I felt a strange sense of closure. I hadn't told them about the lottery win, but I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before. The money had given me something perhaps more valuable than wealth itself: the courage to see my relationships clearly and to set boundaries accordingly. Martha stayed behind after everyone left, helping me clean up the coffee cups and plates. "You did well," she said quietly. "That couldn't have been easy." "It was actually easier than I expected," I replied. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them, because I realized their opinion of me was never based on who I really am. Martha smiled. "That's a powerful realization. So what happens next?" "Next," I said, "we start looking at houses for both of us." 1 year later, my life was unrecognizable. I had moved into a beautiful but modest home in a quiet neighborhood with a garden that brought me joy each morning. Just 3 blocks away was Martha's new house, a single-story craftsman with wide doorways to accommodate her walker on the days her diabetes made walking difficult. My nonprofit organization, Second Family, had grown beyond my expectations. We provided companionship, home repairs, and financial assistance to elderly people living alone, with a special focus on those estranged from their families. The work was rewarding in a way my accounting career had never been, and we had already helped over 200 seniors in our city. Charlotte had eventually joined the organization as our outreach coordinator, bringing her nursing expertise and compassionate nature to our mission. She and I still had our weekly wine nights, though now they took place on my comfortable patio rather than in my cramped apartment. My relationship with my birth family had shifted into something more distant, but also more honest. I maintained occasional contact with most of them, polite birthday calls and holiday gatherings. But the pretense of closeness had fallen away. Without the expectation of emotional intimacy that had never actually existed, our interactions became less painful. None of them knew about my lottery winnings. As far as they were concerned, I had simply found success with my new career in nonprofit management. They seemed to accept this explanation without much curiosity about the details, which told me everything I needed to know about their interest in my life. There had been moments of temptation to reveal the truth, particularly when Jason called asking for money for a new business venture, or when Lisa complained about the cost of her kitchen renovation. But each time, I remembered the silence when I had needed help, and the choice became clear. Interestingly, there had been occasions when family members genuinely needed assistance. When my father had a minor heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills, I anonymously paid them through the hospital's patient assistance fund. When my cousin Ryan finally entered rehab for his gambling addiction, I made an anonymous donation to cover his treatment. They never knew the source of these gifts, and I preferred it that way. Martha and I had dinner together at least twice a week. Her health had improved dramatically with proper medical care and less financial stress. She had retired from teaching, but volunteered at a literacy program 3 days a week, still sharing her love of books with children who needed it. "You know what still amazes me?" she said one evening as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. "How differently everything could have turned out if you had announced your lottery win right away." I nodded, considering this alternate reality. The family would have suddenly become very attentive. Very loving, I imagine. And you would never have known what was real, Martha added. That knowledge, painful as it was, gave you freedom. She was right. The experiment had been brutal, but illuminating. It had shown me who deserved a place in my life and who didn't. It had revealed the true nature of relationships I had spent years trying to strengthen despite their fundamental imbalance. The greatest lesson I had learned was not about others, but about myself. Before the lottery, I had defined my worth by what I could give to others. Constantly try to earn love through sacrifice and generosity, I had allowed myself to be used because I believed that was what family meant, what love required. Now I understood that real love, the kind Martha had shown me, doesn't keep a balance sheet. It gives freely without expectation of return, but also respects boundaries and dignity. It is honest and consistent, present in good times and bad. I had initially kept my winning secret out of fear, worried that money would corrupt my relationships. What I had not anticipated was how the secret would clarify them. Instead, stripping away pretense and revealing truth. The money had not changed who anyone was. It had simply illuminated who they had been all along. My life now was rich in ways that had nothing to do with my bank account. I had purpose through my foundation, genuine connection with Martha and Charlotte, and a hard-won understanding of my own worth that no external validation could shake. Perhaps most importantly, I had peace. The constant anxiety about finances that had been my lifelong companion was gone. But so too was the desperate need for approval from people incapable of giving it. I had built a life aligned with my values rather than my insecurities. Martha reached over and patted my hand, bringing me back to the present moment. You did good, kiddo. Not just with the money, but with what you learned. I smiled at her, overwhelmed with gratitude for this woman who had shown me what family truly meant. I had a good teacher. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the shock of those matching numbers, to the pain of rejection, to the joy of creating something meaningful with my unexpected fortune. The money had changed my life, yes, but not in the ways I had initially feared or hoped. It had simply given me the freedom to see clearly and choose wisely. The most valuable thing I had gained had nothing to do with millions in the bank. It was the understanding that the people who deserve a place in your life are not those who are there when you have everything to give, but those who stay when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty in your life? What did you learn from that experience? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons that might change your perspective. Thank you for listening. Take care.